Welcome everyone. This is the first of 4 webinars that we are running to introduce the new updated CMC standard, together with all the processes and the documents that go with it. I'm going to share my screen and begin the presentation. Okay, so hopefully you can see the slide now, opening slide.
Yes, we can see it.
So in the presentation, which will be run by myself and Chelal, Chair of the Professional Standards Committee, we have 4 main sections in the presentation today. First of all, an overview of the CMC scheme and the standards, just to make sure everybody is aware of what they are and where to find them. And then just a quick slide about how we did the updating, the process we followed. And then we'll talk about how to prepare for a triennial assessment with the new standards, both for IMCs, for institutes and for assessors. And then Chelal will go into a lot of detail about the changes that have been made in the CMC standards, the competence framework, the manual, the code of conduct, and so on. Some of the slides, when I've gone through the presentation of that slide, I'm going to ask if there are any questions or comments. We're happy to take questions during the presentation, so that if you've got a question on any slide, ask it at that time. But I want to keep the questions and the answers quite short, so we make sure we get through the whole of the presentation. Okay, so just an overview of what the CMC standards are. Firstly, the CMC manual, codename CMC 001. This is the manual which is, if you like, the guidance manual, the instruction manual for institutes. And it talks about the governance and management required, how to apply the CMC standards and the assessment process. It talks about the 2 main principles of ICMCI, of equivalence and reciprocity. And it talks about how ICMCI will assess IMCs for their compliance with the standards. And also there is a section about compliance with ISO 17024, which is the standard for certification of persons. So when an institute certifies a CMC, they are in fact certifying a person, and can be, if they want to, follow the standard 17024, and can in fact be accredited by ICMCI through an ICMCI assessment process. An institute can be accredited by ICMCI to show that it follows ISO 17024. But the CMC manual is fully based on that standard, and within the manual itself, you will see how each element of the manual corresponds to a clause within ISO 17024. Now, just to illustrate to you where these elements are on the website, Kazema is going to share her screen with you and show you the ICMCI website.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to share my screen now.
Okay.
And of course, you need to go to ICMCI website, which is cmc-global.org. To log into the website, you have to go to the menu MC designation, as you can see in my screen. Then go to CMC designation page. In this page, you will see the introduction. Then you go down where all the documents related to the current competency framework is located. This is the links for each document as listed here.
Yeah, and that's the current one, which will be okay until October this year. And then lower down are the new standards, which come into force or will be assessed against after October. And you can click on any of those documents and that document will open up for you to see. Any questions on that slide at all? Difficult for me to see any hands up, but somebody could have a look. Also, if you want to raise a question, but you don't want to vocalize it, and you'd like it answered later on, please put it in the chat box and we'll come back to it at the end of the presentation. Okay, so I'll share again, Kazema. And due to the funny way that this works, okay, hopefully you're now seeing my slide again.
Yes.
So moving on, as well as the CMC manual, there are some appendices which give coverage for the other important elements of CMC standards: the competence framework, the matrix of preferred and acceptable assessment techniques which an institute should use to assess CMC candidates, a code of conduct, a common body of knowledge, and additional prerequisites like the number of years a consultant should have been operating, educational qualifications, and so on. So those are the appendices which are the standards against which the Institute and CMCs should comply. And then again, we have other appendices which are guidance documents. So that there is a background document to the competence framework that gives the, if you like, the philosophy behind the new competence framework. There is a one-page overview of the competence framework and an introduction presentation, the PowerPoint presentation that can be used to introduce the new competence framework. There is a glossary of terms, which doesn't have much in it at the moment, but will be expanded to cover any terms. So if you have any terms that you would like to have a definition for, we can include those in the glossary and expand it. Then there's a guidance document on ISO 17024 and how to go about compliance with that. There is some guidance on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This is an external document that you can click on and see. It's a guidance document from the UN. And also some anti-bribery guidance. And these two documents will be particularly useful because these are two elements that have been introduced into the new code of conduct. So there are guidance documents about how to follow those there. Any questions on the manual and the appendices so far? Okay. Anybody? I can't see anybody, so I'm assuming that there aren't any questions so far. Okay. So the way that we went about in PSC putting the new standards together was, first of all, we took the existing scheme, the CMC manual and all the appendices, we took those as a basis because there was nothing intrinsically wrong with any of those documents or processes. All that was needed was to update them to reflect advances in technology, new management thinking, and changes in societal culture. So we took those documents as a basis, and we did some research to find out, first of all, what clients were looking for from consultants. What were the important things that clients looked for when they were engaging a consultant. We considered other standards from similar organizations, other professional organizations, and also other competence frameworks and codes of conduct. And we looked at changes in technology, in management practice and society, and produced some output from that research, which then fed into some drafts of the new standards, which were studied and reviewed by the Professional Standards Committee members. And the drafts were updated based on their comments. Then we submitted to IMCs for comments, and we got some comments back, considered those, and produced some final versions, which were then submitted to the board for approval and published at our annual meeting last year, with a one-year transition period for institutes to apply them, ready for assessments that would take place after October this year. Okay, so having sort of given the background to what those standards are, what should IMCs and assessors be doing now in order to prepare for assessments which will take place after October this year, or from October onwards, I should say, this year? Well, one of the standard things which every institute should do anyway is to review the report from their last triennial assessment, or maybe their first full member assessment, to see what rectifications, recommendations, or suggestions had been included in that report. And obviously, the Institute should then make sure that it's considered all those rectifications, recommendations, and suggestions, and taken action in some form, ready to show the assessors when they ask the question about that. Then whoever is responsible for the systems within the Institute should make sure they're familiar with the new CMC manual, especially the bullet points that you see there in 1.2.3 and 1.2.4, which talk about the governance and management of the Institute itself. Then use the statement of equivalence to do a gap analysis of where the Institute is in its following of the CMC standards, and put corrective actions in place for any areas where you don't see that, that your Institute complies. Now, one thing which is going to change in the process of assessments is that we, the QAC, Quality Assurance Committee, and CUSAMA at the Secretariat, and the assessors between us, and we haven't decided exactly who will do this yet, but one of those people will be sending to the Institute some documents in advance which will help the Institute to prepare for its assessment. Up until now, you have been getting a statement of facts, a basic facts document for you to give some information on the Institute, and a statement of equivalence, which has concentrated just on the CMC assessment process. What we've done within QAC, and we're working on finalizing this, is to produce a new statement of equivalence, which also includes the elements surrounding the CMC process, like the governance of the Institute and its management, its committee structure, its actions to maintain sustainability, and so on and so on. So all of the things which assessors normally look at, and not just the CMC process and assessment itself, but all the other details of the institute, are now included in the new statement of equivalence. And that statement of equivalence has been made exactly the same as the checklist which the assessors will use when they do the assessment. So when, as an institute, you receive your statement of equivalence template to complete, you will see all of the topics and the questions that the assessors are going to ask you. So that should help you in your preparation for assessment. So obviously, you'd also need to study the updated competence framework, the matrix of assessment techniques, and the code of conduct, and make sure that your CMC assessments and your institute's code are equivalent to that. Bearing in mind that we do have this principle within ICMCI of equivalence. So you do have a choice of either using the ICMCI documents as your code of conduct or your competence framework, or you can generate your own, as long as you can show that your code or your competence framework is exactly equivalent to the ICMCI. In other words, a CMC that complies with your competence framework would also be compliant with the ICMCI code. So that's the principle of equivalence, which allows our CMC to be reciprocally accepted by any other member institute of ICMCI. So so you complete your basic facts and your statement of equivalence document, and they should be sent back to the lead assessor in advance of the assessment. There is a sort of a standard list of other documents which assessors like to see, which show the evidence of the governance and management and structure and sustainability of the institute. And these should be prepared in advance. When it is, particularly when it's a virtual assessment, an online assessment, then because of the limited nature of how that assessment takes place online, those documents should be sent to the assessors in advance, and then they can be studied before the assessment takes place. It's also useful to do that if you're going to be undertaking an on-site assessment. So if you send the documents in advance to the assessors, it then gives the assessors much better chance to get into depth in the assessment when they're on site or when they're doing a virtual online assessment. So make sure that you've got all those documents prepared, and if possible, get them all to the assessors in advance, so the assessment, when it happens, can run more smoothly and efficiently. And when it comes to QAC assessors preparing for assessment, obviously make sure that you're familiar with the reference guide and the assessment process. These are two documents which are shared amongst all assessors, generated by the QAC, that give guidelines for how the assessment should be carried out and a process map of the various steps that need to be followed in the assessment process. Now, we need to add to this also that you need to be familiar with the new versions of the assessor checklist and the equivalence statement of equivalence, so that you're aware of the updated versions of those as well. And I should say, we are also working on an updated version of the assessment report to make it in a simpler format, easier and quicker to complete, but still containing all the necessary information. which would be the overview of the institute, the background information, the assessment plan, how the assessment is carried out, the full statement of equivalence against the CMC process and the institute standards, and then the recommendations for rectification recommendation and so on, the conclusions of the assessment and so on. So we are producing a pilot version of this new report, and our good friends in the South African Institute have very kindly agreed that we will run this new assessment process and report template with them in their assessment, which is upcoming right now. So I'm very grateful to them for allowing that to happen. And this will allow us to fine-tune and finalize those documents ready for all assessments that take place from October onwards. Okay, before I hand over to Jalal to go into detail, I just wanted to highlight the main overview of the changes that we see in the new competence framework and code of conduct. I think, as I've mentioned before, we've included now requirements or guidelines for consultants to have the necessary IT skills for effective communication and efficient administration. So, you know, the standard software tools like Microsoft Office or Google Docs or whichever platform you use, and things like email programs and databases and so on. So things that consultants should now be aware of and use to make their job easier and to help make the work with the client more efficient. Awareness of the latest technology and the ability either to apply that technology or to know where to go to find somebody who can apply the latest technology for diagnostics and solutions. And we're talking here about things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, those sort of things. Even if a consultant only just has awareness of them, they should know where these could be applied and where they can go to find experts that can help them in that area of technology. The competence framework also includes much more emphasis now on interpersonal skills. Previous competence frameworks have concentrated very much on the process and the technology, the tools and the processes. What we find, though, is that more and more interpersonal relationships between consultant and client come to the fore now even more than the process and the technology and the tools. So we built into the new competence framework elements of interpersonal skills, awareness of emotional intelligence, and how to use that to improve interpersonal skills and build relationships with the client and other stakeholders. We have built into the competence framework and the code of conduct more elements of societal awareness, because this is the growing area of concern across the whole world. So as consultants, we should be in the lead on the application of all the principles of societal awareness as embodied in the UN Sustainable Goals. We also would want consultants to be more holistic in their thinking. Now, obviously, there are some consultants who deal very much in specialized subjects, but nonetheless, they also need to be aware of the big picture and be able to exercise big picture thinking in whatever project they're engaged. and also think about transformation, because in today's VUCA world, the world of uncertainty, it's important for consultants to be agile in their thinking and to be prepared to help clients in transformation. And the last element I want to talk about in the competence framework is the fact that it's now been integrated much more with the code of conduct and with the ISO 20700 standard, which deals with the guidance for the process of carrying out a management consultancy assignment. So that's the main areas where competence framework has been updated. In the code of conduct, we've slightly rewritten it to highlight 5 areas of responsibility for consultants. Responsibility to the client in doing the job professionally and ethically. Responsibility to society in terms of consideration of societal goals, societal awareness. Responsibility to their organization, whether they're a single operator or partnership or belong to a big firm, the consultant has responsibility for their organization, following the organizational codes and so on. Responsibility to colleagues in terms of support, mentoring maybe, coaching or whatever, or working together as a team on a project. And also responsibility to the profession to uphold the standards of the international consultancy profession. So particularly in terms of the client following 20,700 guidelines, and that is now built into the code of conduct, and in society applying the principles of the UN Societal Development Goals, ISO 26,000 and anti-bribery rules. Now, the anti-bribery things, the OECD document, which is referenced in the Code of Conduct, actually talks about international bribery situations. A more useful document is the guideline document, which you can find on the website, which deals much more with bribery within specific consultancy projects. And I would expect that assessors will be assessing institutes much more using that guideline document, maybe than the OECD document. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Celal now, because he's going to talk in absolute detail about the changes, and we'll take any questions as we go along. Before we swap, any questions on what I've said so far in the overview?
Nick, there are a few questions. Let
me
just read them through the chat, and we can reply, either you or me. The first question is from Ilse. She's asking you or me, or both of us, related to the requirements to be updated on relevant IT technologies. Will there be specific webinars to CMCs offered?
Okay, do you want to answer that first?
Indeed, we don't have an exact plan for this, but we can consider that. It's a good idea, and we can consider this, and we will update you as we progress. This is my quick answer, indeed.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I'll echo that answer as well. I think what we should say is that these webinars are not the end of the process in helping institutes to update to the new standards. Those institutes that have got assessments coming up at the end of this year, from October, we're very happy to help very specifically with those institutes and enter into a conversation with them. And again, yeah, if there are particular areas of the competence framework or code that institutes would like more instruction, more guidance, I'm sure we can arrange specific webinars to do that during the next 3 months, maybe.
Okay, the next question is from Makbule. She asks what kind of IT skills we shall have for effective communication as assessors.
Okay.
From assessor point of view.
Yeah.
If you like, you can answer first, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Nick?
Well, I think from an assessor's point of view, when they are assessing how an institute has assessed a CMC candidate, the sort of thing that an assessor would be asking of the institute is what sort of IT tools and techniques are you looking for your CMC candidates to be using to help them carry out their work? For instance, do they use Microsoft Office for their documentation, for Excel spreadsheets, for databases? Do they use Outlook for email traffic, or are they using another platform, the Google applications for those things? Are they using apps like WhatsApp or things like that for communication? Are they familiar with Zoom or Microsoft Teams? I mean, it's not to specify exactly what software should be used, but it's just to see whether CMC candidates are actually using personal type technology like those apps and platforms in order to help them to do their work more efficiently.
Okay, another question from Altan Tuya, more related to the assessments, Nick. Will 17,024 be explained later on or not? If now, how this standard will be related to IMC assessment?
Okay, right. Well, the first thing to say is there is a clear separation between the triennial assessment of an institute by ICMCI and accreditation of an institute to 17024. So all institutes will undergo their triennial assessments as normal every 3 years, whether on-site or virtual. An institute can also apply to ICMCI for accreditation to the ISO 17024 standard, but that will be a separate process. Okay, so triennial assessment is one process. Accreditation to assessment and accreditation to 17024 is another process altogether, and an institute can choose whether it wants to go for assessment against 17024 or not. But an institute that does choose to be accredited to 17024 can have the 17024 assessment carried out at the same time as the triennial assessment. So both assessments could be done together, but they are two separate processes and two separate assessments.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And, could I also add?
Yes, please.
If it's felt useful by the institutes and by the assessors, we could also, I think, generate an awareness webinar for 17024.
Yeah, I think that will be useful, Nick.
Yeah.
So now I think a comment from Angelo rather than a question.
Yeah.
It says, if we are going to mention anti-bribery, we should simply address governance, under which anti-bribery, corruption, and much more should appear.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah? I think that's okay. We agree on that. And then 3 more questions. Then I think after these questions, I will continue.
Yep.
From Otto, a comment rather than a question. Perhaps there could be from ICMCI some lists of topics that professional development at each IMC should have in their own radar for the development facilitation of their training to their members. Not specific training necessarily, but a list of items in each topic's category that would guide PD learning, personal development learning goals for IMC content production or provision by IMCs.
Okay.
A good idea indeed.
Yeah. And I think, the start point for that, I think, could be the body of knowledge, the appendix, which is the body of knowledge. And if it might be necessary to update and expand that body of knowledge to include all the topics which are becoming of interest now with new technology and new management thinking, I think that would be a good start point as a guideline for institutes in the sort of training, coaching and mentoring that they could be providing or indicating where that sort of training could be provided from.
And I think Ilse has raised hand. Ilse, please.
Thank you very much. I just want to comment on your comments that Nick and you gave related to the IT skills and also related to the question that Makbule raised, because I find it very interesting and very important. The new CMC competency framework is very much related to the new to IT skills, that especially as consultants, we should say, especially as non-IT consultants. And I think we should really update us, and I think it's also partly on ICMCI to cover that part, especially for assessors, because as Nick mentioned, the assessment is not only about the CMC process, it's about the governance, but also about new topics in our area. So I would really recommend to put emphasis on this area related to assessments, but also related to trainings and more information on non-IT consultants. I think ICMCI can also set the standard on these skills and knowledge related to new technologies in a widely area, and do really much more in that respect as well.
Definitely, Ilse. The emphasis here is more for the non-IT consultants, definitely. Okay. So, Nick, so I think we have completed all the questions and comments up to now. Nick, shall I continue from the slides?
The screen is all yours.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So my part is more focused on the competency framework. I hope you can see my slide on the screen.
Yes.
So, and then let me see. So this was the last slide you have mentioned. So indeed, I will just go through the main details, the overall structure and the key messages, key expectations from CMCs, and the rest will be available in the CMC competence manual, CMC manual, and the additional documents and all supporting documents. And if you have any further questions, we will be available today or anytime you would like to ask your questions. So in the new competence framework, we have the following structure. We have four main, let's say, sections or divisions: business insight and attitude, practice capabilities, behavior capabilities, code of ethics, and professional conduct. With the business insight and attitude, it has two dimensions. One is about client, functional and sectorial knowledge, which means the CMC is expected to be aware or knowledgeable about its client, its structure, its way of working, its industry and its functions before or prior to the services, consultancy services. This is one dimension of business insight and attitude. The other dimension is the consultancy and consulting business insight, which will be provided for the client by the consultant. So one aspect is focused on the client and its functions and sector. The other dimension is focused on the services to be provided by the consultant, the consultancy and consulting business insight. The second aspect or concept is practice capabilities, assigning and engagement management methodologies, how the consultant and the services are assigned and how the engagement is defined or described. And then the capabilities considers consultative capabilities, which are described in full detail in the relevant section of the competence framework. The third title is behavior capabilities, personal interaction, as also mentioned by Nick already as a highlight, as a key aspect, personal interaction and relationship management with the client people, the management, the staff, and intervention skills like communication, like relationship management and other things, and also consultative behavior as part of the behavior capabilities in the competence framework. And the last section or the title is Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct are emphasized in this section, including aspects of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and other aspects, and including basic aspects of ethics and Code of Ethics in this section. So I just repeat 4 main titles in the competence framework: business insight and attitude, practice and capabilities, behavior capabilities, code of ethics, and professional conduct. So I see 2 messages in the chat. If I look at these, let me see. I do not see professional capabilities anymore. Where are they gone? So I think they are in the competence framework. This is the title of that. We will come to that point later on. So then another question. So that was all. I think we have talked about that. So in this slide, we see the structure: the business competence, technical competence, consulting skills, values and behavior competence, and personal development competence. Personal development as also part of the continued learning and development. So for each of them, we have the subtitles. For business competence, like client business insight and consulting business, as I have already mentioned, more focused on the client, understanding the internal and external factors impacting on the project for the consultant, for his or her services. And consulting business insight includes understanding the management consultancy environment and its commercial aspects. Again, both of these, A and B, are more related to the client and its business, including client understanding, client business knowledge, external awareness, consultancy business knowledge, and commercial aspects of assignments. You don't have to be expert in these areas, but you need to have good understanding of the knowledge. You need to have good understanding of the business of the client. The technical competence is related to functional specialization, recognized as an expert in own discipline, like including functional knowledge and skills, and sectorial knowledge and experience. So the technical competence is required in this section and mentioned in this section. Consulting skills, engagement management, this determines the scope of client assignments, manages client and other stakeholders' expectations. The stakeholder focus is another key aspect, as was also especially mentioned in ISO 27700. Stakeholder awareness and stakeholder focus is more emphasized in this new version of competence framework. The consultant is expected, or CMC is expected, to be more aware about the stakeholders of the client. A good list of stakeholders is provided in the ISO 27700 standard as an appendix. So engages expertise of others where appropriate. So you may need to have a good understanding of stakeholder relationship, the impact and the interaction of stakeholders between the client is an important aspect to understand and be aware of. So these include client focus, assignment management, consulting knowledge, consulting process techniques, tools and methodologies, risk and quality management. These were risk and quality management were also mentioned in the previous version, but emphasized more in this new version. Values and behavior competence includes ethics and professionalism, analytical skills, personal interaction, and personal development competence is mainly focused on the continued learning and development, like some additional trainings, some follow-ups and trainings on technology, IT skills, and consultancy expertise, and all other relevant areas. So if we look at this slide with more emphasis on the values and behavior competence and personal development, we can also see ethics and professionalism, analytical skills, and personal interaction are more emphasized in EFG parts of the section for values and behavior competence, and demonstrating ethical behavior, professional behavior are also key aspects. And in analytical skills, problem solving, decision making, and recommendation and innovation are parts of that section. And personal interaction includes handling complexity, working in, for example, VUCA conditions, volatile, uncertain and complex and ambiguous situations, interacts effectively with others, demonstrates influencing skills and communication skills. So continuous learning, as I said before, includes more self-development, plans self-development, and shows track record of personal growth as one of the key aspects of competence framework. So this is the structure, and you will see this structure in the full document of CMC competence framework. For example, in client business insight, we have this structure described for each column of the level of CMC expectations. One is the foundation level, the second one is CMC level, and the third one is profession leader. And these are good practices described in these cells, in these boxes, for those expectations in relevant columns. But the competence here, for example, client understanding is the key, client business knowledge is the key, and external awareness is the key. The rest are explanations. For example, in CMC, the explanation, analysis, business culture, structure, processes, etc. This text describes what we can expect for client business knowledge. These are the good practices that we are guided as assessors, or we are, let's say, informed as the IMCs to prepare our documents. And assessors are expected to use these as guidelines, and there may be similar situations or similar good practices which can be expected or considered. As an overall approach, we have the policies at the top, including CSR, IP, capability, project governance, communication, etc. These are also mentioned in ISO 27700. And These are expected to be included in the IMC documents as policies related to CMC. And as a backbone of the project itself, the consulting process, having contracting, execution, and closure described in full detail in ISO 27700. So, and then we have the services, approaches, roles, and refining the agreed work, etc. These are the details of the ISO 27700 as part of the contracting, execution, and closure. Then you can also consider as an integrated package the 2700, the policies, CMC, ethics, and other aspects as a whole. So again, if you look at the structure, we can also see the dimensions, including continual professional development, reflection and feedback, and then continued personal learning and development, and CMC global breadth of knowledge, skills, and abilities directory. We have described the whole competence framework in this structure. In the middle, you have the main frame, the structure, and in the surroundings, you have something like a continuous improvement approach, something like the continuous learning, continued personal learning development, learning and development in the whole framework as one of the, let's say, key aspects in the whole package of the competence framework. We have also a list. I will not go into full details, but we can send you the details later on. Version in 2014, we had on the left-hand side the key aspects, and version 2021 in the middle column, and we have some changes highlighted here. Personal development competence, for example, is named as personal behavior, and also consultancy and consulting business insight, including some behaviors, and also consultancy profession. So these are split into a different framework, but having the same concepts or aspects. So this is the full description. Maybe you are not able to see the whole details, and you don't have to read all of them. On the left-hand side, we have the key titles in the new version of the competence framework, and the 24 competencies in the middle column. The 24 competencies are the main titles that we need to focus and expect from CMCs. And on the right-hand side, we have the full details. But the assessors are expected to focus on 24 competencies. And the detailed on the right-hand side are including, as in the full description of the document, a competency framework. They are describing the good practices and the expectation from CMCs as described in good practices. But 24 competencies are the key that we need to focus as assessors. And one of the purposes that we have organized these webinars, both for assessors and IMCs at the same time, we just wanted to demonstrate transparency to both sides, that we share the same things at the same time with the assessors and the IMCs. Then we have this slide. IMC's policy is that ICMCI's policy is that the ICMCI CMC standard is at a relatively high level, while leaving a significant degree of freedom to member countries in detailed specification of their CMC standards, as described by Nick in the first part, which was highlighted as equivalence. So the equivalence documents describe their own approaches, their own processes and principles. And if the equivalents are right, then they will be comparable and acceptable as in the same level or content with the ICMCI principles. then ICMCI respects the historical, cultural, and legal diversity of the members. ICMCI fully accepts diversity in national CMC standards and procedures in reflection of these valid differences, definitely. Otherwise, we will not have creativity, flexibility, and diversity. And ICMCI shall also require that institute demonstrates to the satisfaction of ICMCI that the institute CMC standard requires at least the equivalent level of professionalism and ethics in candidate as the ICMCI standards. This way, all the CMC labels will be equal at all IMCs in the ICMCI community. This will only be possible by this way. I see some questions are coming in the chat. I will just finish the next 2 slides and I will answer the questions. Okay. So the main focus is 24 competencies, as I said. Just to summarize, this is, I think, one of the last slides to finish the presentation in my part. The main focus is 24 competencies, and the rest of the explanations in the competence framework are representing good practices, and we are expecting the assessors to focus on these 24 competencies and consider the other explanations in the 3 columns, foundation, CMC, and profession leader as the good practices for consideration. 51 examples of competencies, as I said, yes, they are good practices, and assessors are not expected to use them as checklists. And we expect them to have some flexibility, some understanding of the implementation or the real cases. So understanding the big picture is also important from assessors' point of view. We are expecting them to understand the ecosystem of IMC, who are the key stakeholders, who are the main partners, and what are the key processes, and what are the interactions between the IMC and the ecosystem, and also who are the key stakeholders of IMC. And by understanding these ecosystem and stakeholder concepts, they will be more able to, let's say, they will be more able to comment on the processes and the procedures in relation to CMC procedures in the IMC. Respect principles of equivalence, culture and local aspects. Respecting them also help the assessment. Consideration of awareness of holistic and transformational thinking and UNSDG, as already mentioned by Nick in the meantime. And taking integration with Code of Conduct and ISO 20700 into account is also another good approach to see the integrated picture with Code of Conduct, ISO 20700, UNSDG, as I have mentioned in a couple of minutes ago. And remember key dimensions of CMC competence framework, which are business insight and attitude, practical capabilities, behavior capabilities, code of ethics, and professional conduct, as I have started with my presentation, with emphasis on new concepts such as IT skills, awareness of and ability to apply latest technology, interpersonal skills, and emotional intelligence. Indeed, these are the key changes, the new content in the new competence framework. And as we already discussed and answered to some questions, we will give more emphasis on these, and we'll try to support you with some additional webinars or programs. So I think that was all from my side. So let me just go through the questions in chat. Let me see.
Jalal, there's a question from Ilse.
Yes.
About the profession leader.
Yes.
Do you think you might possibly go back to that slide which shows one page of the competence framework with the 3 designations?
Of course, Nick. Of course, yeah. This one?
Back further. That one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the right,
Profession
you
leader.
see a designation profession leader. In fact, this is not new. It has been in the competence framework since 2014, but it was not in the competence framework document itself. It was in a separate document that actually gave these 3 levels of maturity. So it's not new, but it is something which has not yet been used and could be used by an institute to recognize members of the institute who, from the institute and from their peers, are recognized as being leaders within the profession in that country.
And also
So
made
it's
some
not-
contribution.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a whole ICMCI thing at the moment. It's more for an individual institute to recognize those members that have made a real contribution to the institute, to the profession, to their fellow consultants within their institute. So it could be those that have carried out a lot of training, have been on committees and the board of the institute and developed it over the years, many different ways that you could use to assess and assign a profession leader a designation to them. Okay, next question.
Mhm. Okay, I am checking the chat box. Okay. So the next question. In terms of definitions, please differentiate between competence and capability. Okay, so I think this will be included in the glossary. Nick, do you have anything to add on this? Yeah. So this is a good idea, not to confuse between competence and capability. We will include them as key terms in glossary. Okay?
Yeah, there are the issue we have is that there are many words which can mean the same thing for some people and can mean something very different for other people. So we do need to make sure we clearly define, and we obviously need to do some more work on that one in terms of competence and capability, and in terms of assignment and engagement, because they are actually 2 very different things. Perhaps we need to define those differences more clearly, and the glossary of terms and the development of that glossary will be, I think, the key document we will work on.
Okay, I fully agree, and we will work on that. So Franco also mentions that he agrees with Angelo, and Ilse's question, I think Nick has already replied it. And from a question from Sue, will the matrix CMC 006 be updated to reflect and align with the changes to the competence framework? I think it is already updated in the new version. If not, we will review and do the necessary actions. Franco, will these slides be made available to us? Yes, they will be sent to you. Otto, may I suggest that ICMCI issues some standard graphics assets like this one for competencies to use for internal and external advocacy by IMCs with the ICMCI brand and on the graphics. This can be of great use of leverage the global ICMCI brand on local level communications. Very good idea, and we will look at it as I think, Nick, we can cooperate on this as the QAC and PSC committees. Okay. So any other question? If we go down. Let me check. So do you have the applications of sustainability development goals of UN? Makbule is asking. not specifically at the moment, but we can focus on this applications of sustainability development goals of United Nations. We can make a search, and if you identify some useful resources, we will share them with you. Then Makbule, again, the 24 competencies are too much for any applicant want to have CMC, how we can examine him or her in these competencies. The new standard is very difficult for any consultant with 5 years experience. So I can take this as a comment, and we will see in the new period, indeed. Franco has a comment or question. A written examination and some questionnaire could be of some help. Okay, indeed, we will also send you some examples and updated version of the checklist and equivalence document and other supporting documents soon. So if you need more support, we will be ready to help you. Nick, do you have anything to add on this?
Not on that particularly, but I'm seeing a couple of questions which I'd really like to understand a bit better. Will the QAC be done in person or online? And another one, must the QAC be done in 2022? If the first question is, will the triennial assessment be done in person or online, then the answer to that is still at the moment, QAC triennial assessments will continue to be done online. But if a triennial assessment has been done online, which should have been a full on-site assessment, then the next triennial assessment will be done in person. So we are, for two reasons, we are continuing at the moment generally online assessments. One is to obviously ease the financial burden of carrying out assessments, because carrying them out in person is a more costly item. But more to the point, we are still taking precautions in terms of worldwide pandemics. And at the moment, we feel it's safest for the time being to continue with online assessments. But like I said, at some point, every institute will have an on-site assessment because that's part of our policy anyway, is that every third assessment should be an online, an on-site assessment. In terms of from TWIA, should the QAC be carried out in 2022? I think actually the next Thailand assessment is actually due in 2024, by which time it will probably be an on-site assessment. I think we'll be doing on-site assessments.
Nick, excuse me, but Toya is from Mongolia. So,
Sorry, Mongolia.
yeah, okay.
Why am I thinking Thailand?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
It's due in 2023 for Mongolia. So it doesn't have to be done this year, unless you would like to do it this year. But it's supposed to be an on-site assessment next year. I think let's discuss that in detail with TWIA and Mongolia as to how that assessment will be done. But it's due next year.
Okay, so a few more questions or comments. Let me just go through them. From Kim, there's a comment, I think. Having been an assessor since 2009, I appreciate very much the work of the PSC, Nick, Jalal, and the Secretariat for taking the assessment process to a new high and transparent professional level. Thank you very much, Kim. We try to do our best. This is our duty. So Angelo says, my original research shows that competency is a combination of knowledge, skill, and attitude based on experience. Okay, indeed, we will go through the glossary and check if we have the right definitions of competence, knowledge, and other keywords, as you have mentioned already.
Angelo, I'm totally in agreement with that definition of competence.
Yeah,
It
definitely.
is knowledge, experience, and what we also add in terms of competence is the ability to show successful application. So maybe, you know, the competence is really a level above capability. It's not just that a consultant is capable of doing something, but they are able to show by good, solid evidence that they have successfully applied it.
Okay, from Altantuya is body of knowledge explained in the glossary. I will check that, and you say if not, can kindly explain. Of course, we will definitely explain it if it is not there. So I think the next two questions have been answered by Daniel Chen from Hong Kong. Will the QAC be done online or in person? Did we answer this question, Nick? From Hong Kong.
I think so, but if there is a further question or clarification, we can do that.
Another one from Altantuya, will the QAC be done in 2022? I think this was also answered. A useful link by Alan Blackman about UN goals. If you take a note on that, unglobalcompact.org. This is really a good link. I know it already, and I have used it in my business many times. And then from Simon, another link, sdgs.un.org, very useful. And some thanks and appreciations, etc. Thank you very much. We will be sharing the recording and presentations with all IMCs. Okay, so some thanks and appreciations. So that was all, I think. We also thank you for your kind attention and participation and even contribution. And please know that this will not stop here. We will continue to work and continue to improve everything what we have in hand in a continuous improvement approach. And please don't hesitate to send us questions anytime. We are here to help you. So Nick, any final words from your side or on behalf of both of us? You are muted, Nick.
I'm sure some people are very happy about that. No comment from you, Sorin, thank you.
No, nice.
Yeah, one very important thing we had to do, which is to take a photograph, because this is a landmark webinar for ICMCI, I think, in terms of moving to a new way of doing things.